Welcome to a story of Tokusatsu, where I give you a recap and review of a Super Sentai show. However, this time, I'll be going episode by episode, giving you the recap, while also giving you my thoughts on it as we go along. Full spoilers ahead. We start in a normal casino, when three not-so-normal people burst in. They're the thieves everyone's talking about, and they're here for a Gangler's Lupin collection piece. Ganglers are monsters that hide treasures in their safes, and luckily, the thieves can transform. But where the thieves are, the police aren't far behind. The Lupinrangers, as the thieves are called, are quite popular, much to this police officer's dismay. Our two Red Rangers meet, not as rangers, but as civilians. Lupin Red, Kairi, and Patron Ichigo, Keiichiro, were then taken to the Bistro Jura, or the cafe, with Lupin Yellow, Umika, and Lupin Blue, Toma. Plus the butler who sends them on missions, Kogure. I'm barely gonna mention Kogure in general, but he is here on behalf of Arsène Lupin's descendants. Then to Global Police Headquarters with
Patranger
Sakia and Patron Sango Tsukasa and Commissioner Hilltop, plus their robot buddy, Jim Carter. Sakia says it might have been a good thing that the thieves took down the Ganglers since some casino people were disappearing, but Keiichiro doesn't want to hear none of it. As some backstory for the Lupinrangers, Kogure says Arsène Lupin's treasures were taken by the Ganglers, interdimensional monsters, so Kogure hired the Lupinrangers to get them back in exchange for a wish. Now to our monster faction, led by Don Dogranio. He's made an appearance to tell his gang that he's searching for a successor, and whoever takes over the city may take his chair, which is a neat way to explain why all the monsters don't just fight the teams all together instead of one at a time. Also real quick, Don Dogranio's right-hand man, Destra, is really cool looking. The Lupinrangers are given their next mission, to infiltrate a warehouse for treasure. They begin to fight the Ganglers, and as that happens, Commissioner Hilltop has a special surprise for the Patrangers. Toma and Umika are taken by the Gangler, when Kairi remembers a promise they made to make their dreams come true. And so, they transform into the Lupinrangers.
ルパンレッド、ルパンブルー、ルパンイエロー、怪盗戦隊、ルパンレンジャー。
They fight the Gangler in a really cool scene, but I did mention that wherever the thieves are, the cops are close behind. Now the global police have their own means of fighting.
警察犬1号パトライズ、警察チェンジ、パトレンジャー、パトレン1号、パトレン2号、パトレン3号、警察戦隊、パトレンジャー。
Episode 2. The Patrangers face off against the Lupinrangers with, again, some really cool choreography. They even fight by summoning their vehicles, which would seem like it would cause a lot of collateral damage, but anyway. The Lupinrangers get away, and we're told their backstory. Long ago, Kairi got in an argument with his brother and stepped away. In that quick second, his brother was encased in ice and shattered. Toma and Umika each faced similar events, with their only hint being a man, a monster with a sombrero. Right after that, a butler, Kogure, offered the three a chance to bring back their loved ones if they gather Arsène Lupin's treasures of his collection, on behalf of Lupin's descendants. A Gangler starts to attack the city, so the Lupinrangers and Patrangers fight again. This time, the Lupinrangers were able to steal the Gangler's treasures of the Lupin collection. The Patrangers were also given a special weapon, the Good Striker, which allows them to combine for a finishing move. Now we see how a Gangler grows giant, by being shot by the Gangler's doctor, Gosh. With that, the Lupinrangers summon their mechs and the Good Striker flies alongside them, allowing them to combine into Lupin Kaiser.
引く？よいしょ。
なんか出た。オイラの名前はグッドストライカー。
永遠に。アデュー。
気分は最高。
After defeating the Gangler, the Lupinrangers regroup at the cafe, but then the Patrangers arrive, looking as serious as ever. Wow, that was actually a pretty cool episode. So going into the next one, It turns out that the Patrangers are here for lunch since it's close to Global Police HQ, but then they're alerted about a gangler attack. Soon after, we're given more details on Tomo's backstory. He was going to get married to a woman named Aya, but he's late for their shopping date. She even says that 5 minutes can be the difference between life and death. If only Toma knew to take that literally. Toma seems calm on the surface, but he often wants to get things done quick and at that moment. Like when he wanted to grab a VS changer while the Patrangers were in their cafe. Kairi tries to explain that they have to be smarter about these things, which was a line paralleled by Aya, in that things might seem slow at first, but a good plan will take them far. I think that was a good lesson, ironically given by thieves, who kids probably shouldn't be looking up to, but, it's nice nonetheless. Though Toma isn't the only one who gets a lesson, as earlier, Sakia's changer was stolen during the gangler attack. Keiichiro berates him back at base, though Tsukasa tells him to calm down. Sakia already feels bad enough. Then their commander gives some advice. Messing up in the workplace can also be fixed in the workplace. So after falling for a trap, Sakia shoots his way out and rescues his team. That's not as in-depth as Toma's stories, but I do like what they're going for here, even though the Sakia B-plot is only here for a minute. Anyway, the Gangler's Lupin collection is stolen by the Lupinrangers, and they use Good Striker to split Kairi in 3 for a finisher. As the Gangler grows giant, the Patrangers summon their own mech, which Good Striker is part of, and even has a cute little police hat. By the end, Kogure explains that Good Striker, or Goody, is a wild card and might even be the reason why the Patrangers have VS changers in the first place. Speaking of which, the Patrangers come back to the cafe, where Sakia sees Umika for the first time and falls for her. Keiichiro tells him to stop being a creep. Good on him. Episode 4. We get a bit of focus on Tsukasa. She's very serious about her work, and stern to boot, possibly even more than Keiichiro, just not as hot-headed. We learn they were colleagues at the academy, so she is used to Keiichiro's hot-headedness, and says she's not as transparent as he is. The Patrangers investigate several locked room mysteries happening around the city, where people begin to disappear. They stop to look at some shark plushies that were in these rooms, and the toy vendor turns out to be a gangler. The Lupinrangers show up, and Umika, still transformed, hesitantly explains that the gangler has the ability to make people disappear through certain means. In secret, Umika tells her team that she gave the enemy the hint because the global police are trying to save people, so the Lupin should at least be a little more sympathetic, which is a good takeaway, I think. Tsukasa is later left alone with the shark plush as evidence, and we see that her vice is cuddling up to plushies. Same. Putting her face to the toy teleported her to the gangler's hideout, where the gangler was trying to gather up people like merchandise. The rest of her team appear, as well as the Lupins, and the 3 factions fight. Tsukasa repays Umika the favor of her hint by allowing Umika to take the gangler's Lupin collection piece. At the end, we see that the commander had a hidden camera in the global police base, so Keiichiro and Sakuya were able to cuddle up to the plush the same way as Tsukasa. Keiichiro says that he knew she was into plushies, so they gave it a try, and that's how they saved her. Is it wrong for me to say I think this is one of the classic Sentai episodes? I don't even know why. Whenever I think about Lupinranger vs. Patranger, the shark plush episode is the first thing that comes to mind. Well, at least it was another good episode, and it was tons of fun. I especially love that Tsukasa was the focus here. Episode 5. Commander Hilltop transports a couple of Lupin collection pieces when he gets attacked by a gangler, losing those pieces. Both the Lupins and Pats take action, ending up in a fight against the gangler in a warehouse, though Keiichiro and Kairi face off alone. Kairi gets the upper hand, being able to land multiple blows. They both use the pieces that were intended for the other, Kairi in a bike and Keiichiro in a helicopter. Meanwhile, Don Granio's right-hand man makes himself known, Destra, a general that's able to use his hammer to cause explosions. The battle against Destra makes both teams sustain heavy damage, and by the end, Keiichiro goes quiet after losing his own battle. The standout thing for me here is when Kairi and Keiichiro face off. Then Kairi talks down to the cop about how they're fighting their own battles, but Keiichiro doesn't really understand what he's saying. And this scene does come up quite a bit, so I like that even more. Episode 6. The Patrangers come across a gangler from earlier that got away during their fight with Destra. Keiichiro is adamant about stalling the fight so they can fight the Lupins again, but the gangler gets away. Tsukasa slaps Keiichiro to get him to focus. She reminisces back to when they first got assigned to this job, when Keiichiro said they have a duty to protect the people and not misuse the power they were entrusted with. Meanwhile, Don Dogranio speaks to Destra about acting on his own in the previous episode. Destra was given information about the human world by someone named Zamigo. Also in another quick scene, Sake goes to the Cafe Judo and basically spills the tea to the Lupinrangers about Keiichiro getting slapped by Tsukasa. I mean, hey, same. The two teams fight the previous gangler again. A big attack is about to get through to Kairi, but he dodges while Keiichiro takes it head on, causing brick stairs behind him to fall. Keiichiro uses his own body as a shield to protect civilians that were underneath, remembering his own words to Tsukasa. They have a duty to protect the people. I'm telling you right now, this scene alone is so powerful. I think it's one of the reasons why I like Keiichiro so much. After the gangler is defeated, we catch a glimpse of Zamigo, who scoffs at Destra's failure to use his given information wisely. At the judo, the Lupins are a little down not winning their last confrontation, but Kairi assures them that Patron Ichigo is their main blockade. The Lupins are also allowed to keep their helicopter piece as it's compatible with a VS changer, unlike the rest of the Lupin collection. Since, past Sentai toys aren't really known to combine with newer toys. Yes, except the Sentai gear and other toys, I get it. Then back at Global Police HQ, Keiichiro apologizes for letting his lust for revenge take over him, but Commander Hilltop offers him a cookie, as Keiichiro at least has his heart in the right place. Episode 7. The Patrangers have lunch at Cafe Judo, and Sakio is being his, endearing self and asks Umika out. Keiichiro rightfully tells him to knock it off. A gangler attacks and the Lupinrangers go fight it, but Kairi and Toma get absorbed by it. Umika is left alone to think about when she became best friends with a girl named Uchihara. Then a while ago, Uchihara pushed Umika out of the way of being frozen, which was when Umika was given the chance to become a Lupinranger. Umika felt bad that Kairi saved her in the same way during this gangler attack, when Kogure assures Umika that as long as she tries hard, there will always be hope. Umika thinks of a plan to lure out the gangler by agreeing to go on a date with Sakia in a fancy restaurant. As she planned, the gangler arrives, and she uses the Patrangers as bait to steal the Lupin collection, freeing her team. Kairi always believed in her and plays around, rubbing her nose. Or, grabbing her nose. The next day, the Patrangers go back to the cafe, where Umika apologizes for basically ditching Sakia, but offers to pay for their lunch. Sakia starts to like her even more, saying it's not just a fling like his other crushes. Kairi teases Umika like yesterday, but Tsukasa sees them, starting to form a connection. Episode 8. Tsukasa shares her suspicions with the team. Jim Carter analyzes the workers at the cafe, looking into their backstories and seeing how they've lost people 1 year ago. Kairi especially sticks out because he lost his parents and only had his brother until that incident. The Patrangers set up a plan for Jim Carter to pretend to be a gangler, so the Lupins would have to leave the cafe to go after him. Although, all 3 Lupins appear to stop Jim. Tsukasa rushes into the cafe and sees all the Lupins there, even Kairi. Fortunately, this works out because Kairi and Keiichiro, still unknowing of each other, find a secret ghost warehouse. After a mecha battle, the cafe workers are no longer under suspicion, but the Patrangers are still going to be wary. Oh, I forgot to mention that Goody was given the Lupins intel on the Pat spying on them. I think so far this might be the best representation of what I was expecting out of Lupinranger versus Patranger. Basically both teams playing cat and mouse against each other, just waiting for that moment for them to slip up. You know what? Now this kind of reminds me of Death Note, but not. Guy who has only seen Death Note. Wow, this really reminds me of Death Note. Anyway, episode 9. It's business as usual until the Patrangers get the upper hand against one gangler. The monster is seemingly defeated, and the Lupins couldn't make it in time to take his piece of the Lupin collection. The Lupinrangers are sullen since they needed every single piece of the collection, but since the monster blew up, they lost their chance. Naturally, Kairi gets upset. The rest of the episode has to do with Kairi trying to take a Lupin collection piece from a French lady. It's not too important to the plot, I guess, but it does give him a little more backstory about how he looked up to his brother, but still felt like he was constantly in his shadow. I wouldn't say this is a bad episode, but this is kind of a trend with Lupinranger vs. Patranger as a whole. We get really interesting setups, or at least continuations, or a reference to the previous episode, and then the rest of the episode does its own thing, I guess. Again, not terrible, and I kinda like this episode, but I was more into what the setup was having. Episode 10. However, the Lupins take a second to think, and realize that Ghost didn't appear when the gangler died, which usually does. Umika softens up to Sakuya to get info out of him, and also realizes that Ghost didn't show up. Once the information is relayed, the Patrangers go out to search for the gangler, now knowing it didn't get destroyed. But, backing up real quick, Keiichiro notices Kairi is sulking outside on a bridge. Kairi, hating the Pats for destroying the monster before they could take out the Lupin collection, isn't friendly at all. He is uninterested until Keiichiro offhandedly mentions seeing a weirdo wearing a sombrero and chewing on ice earlier. Later on, when the Patrangers are after the gangler, Kairi investigates the ice-eating sombrero man, finding him in a warehouse. Kairi immediately tries to shoot, but the man is faster on the draw. This is Zamigo Delma, a cool guy who doesn't seem to take much seriously, and he's a good fighter, plus a cowboy. I just love that design and how after he shoots, he has to create more ice guns, kinda like Reaper from Overwatch. Gosh, I can't believe I mentioned Overwatch. I hate Overwatch. Anyway, moving on. The Lupinrangers are able to get a collection piece for sure this time before the monster is defeated, and Zamigo has had enough fun for one day. Back at the cafe, Umika is about to mention Zamigo to Kogure, but her friends stop her. They tell her that Zamigo is their backup plan to get their loved ones back, in case the collection pieces don't work out. Oh gosh, Episode 11, the Patrangers change genders because of a gangler. There's a really neat moment with Sakuya explaining that he looked up to Keiichiro and Sakuya since the academy, and they were the ones who said it's okay to cry because those tears are what are fueling them to protect people. It's an amazing scene that it just had to come out of this episode. Oh my gosh. I'm just not a big fan of body swap. The most I'll say is it makes me feel a little icky, and this episode does not help that, especially when the Patrangers, the male ones, they like grab their chest and they're like, what, I'm a girl now? And that's kind of the whole joke, and I don't like that, so moving on. Episode 12 is another Toma episode, where a kid steals a piece of the Lupin collection that's a spray-painted Time Ranger changer. The piece is supposed to make someone faster, and the boy is trying to win a race to make his friends happy. Though this reminds Toma of his own fiancé. In a great scene, his fiancé reads him a fairy tale, and Toma is a little put off, but his fiancé says there's nothing wrong with believing in stories. So at the end, the boy wins but feels bad because he used the piece, until Toma points out that the piece was fake and Toma exchanged it the night before. Toma says that sometimes, fairy tales are worth believing in. I don't know if this is like the post episode 11 talk, but man, this was actually really, really cool. I love the Toma focused episodes. So going on into episode 13, Tsukasa and Umika go on a date. Okay, not really, but it's really cute, and while I don't have much overall to say about it, I'd say this is one of my favorite episodes so far. Their chemistry is really good, and the ending joke of Tsukasa getting the wrong plushie made me laugh way too hard. Absolutely insane that it took 14 episodes, but we finally got one focusing mainly on the Patrangers, and a two-parter at that. And I'm saying mainly, okay? Mainly the Patrangers. I know they had some focus in the past episodes, but this is all about them. Isn't that cool? The Patrangers are told of strange noises happening in the mountains, so Keiichiro promises a young boy that they'll find the source and deal with it.
約束する
This gives us a flashback to a young Keiichiro wanting to stop criminals and looking up to the police. It's a sweet scene and shows us why Keiichiro is the way he is. Though later on we see a gangler talk about how his brother got crushed by the Patranger's mecha in an earlier episode, and that is way more morbid than I thought it would be. Wow, I can't believe they actually went that far. Anyway, despite being a two-parter, and being Patranger focused, this is still a Lupat episode. Just with more time on the Patrangers and how they don't plan too much. They just go into fights and brute force everything, even after ending up in the hospital. We also get a bit more Hilltop talking with the Lupinrangers at the cafe, and that's just awesome because we get like little to none of that. Okay, you know I'm exaggerating when I say none because it's clearly obviously happening right here on screen, but it almost feels like none. And at the end, the boy starts to see Saki as a real hero, which is also really funny, really amazing. Poor Keiichiro, I love that guy. Episode 16. Like I said earlier, I am normally the biggest hater of body swap episodes in Sentai, though this one is okay. A gangler swaps bodies with Toma and himself, realizing how cool it is being human. Because the gangler is able to pick up girls. Okay, that part aside, Kairi and Toma have a heart-to-heart, with Toma saying he himself should be defeated if need be. So in a confrontation against the gangler Toma, Kairi says he'll shoot him straight in the heart. The gangler thinks he's bluffing, but right as the shot is taken, the gangler switches bodies again. We see that Kairi used his own hand as a shield for the shot, doing anything to protect his friends. That part alone makes this episode great, along with being Toma-focused, and even though I still don't like body swaps, this one did have a couple great moments. Episode 17. A young lady has a crush on Keiichiro and gives him flowers, though Keiichiro is seemingly oblivious to it. Once the girl leaves, Keiichiro admits to his team that he does have feelings but can't get into a relationship because he has a duty to carry out first. Even though a lot of this episode focuses on the lady, it does give us a closer insight on Keiichiro and even Umika, who actually wants these two to be together. If that wasn't enough, Keiichiro gives the lady a vinyl that he loves, saying his favorite song is called Hidden Feelings. So the monster of the week puts them all into a dream world, where Keiichiro's dream is to live peacefully. By the end, the lady has to leave to study abroad, but Keiichiro doesn't make it in time for her flight, saying that he actually did care, he just wishes things could be different. Man, see, I love this guy. He's so cool. Oh, and in the dream world, Sakuya dreams of Umika. Alright then. But speaking of the dream world, Keiichiro sees Umika walk off, and also remembers her in the dream world, but realizes that Umika herself wasn't with them in person during the fight with the gangler. Episode 18. The Lupin Collection Secret. The secret is that the Lupin Collection was made in the gangler world. Woo. Oh, and also humans created some themselves to make it work with the VS changers. It's told pretty quickly, though the rest of the episode has a twist where we focus on Goody. He was created by Arsène Lupin, the first of the Lupin Collection, and was entrusted to take care of the rest. I know I didn't say much, but this was a pretty neat episode and even has continuity with previous ones. And the action is amazing as always. In fact, as a slight aside, this showcases why I love the idea of a Ranger team versus Ranger team, as both teams fight for Goody and Kairi even infiltrates their mech, so they have like 3 separate fights going on at once while the gangler is still attacking. Plus how the Pats plan to take Goody from the Lupins was just so much fun. This definitely shows at least a little bit of the potential the show's main idea had. 19. Another Sakuya episode. This time, he stops the gangler in disguise from being creepy with some girls, so the gangler turns invisible to make Sakuya look bad in front of a global police supervisor. I really want to like this one since it gives some characterization for Sakuya, but it comes off a bit hollow, and the main gripe I have is that it makes the Patrangers look incompetent for one simple reason. No one believes Sakuya when he says the gangler could be invisible. The Patrangers know that the ganglers have 2 abilities, the Lupin Piece ability and the monster's own ability. Like, yeah, maybe if they're civilians and still new to this, then Sakuya would come off weird, but they're the Patrangers for the global police. Why is an invisible monster not a possibility? The only other scene I like is Commander Hilltop going against the supervisor and giving Sakuya his VS changer again. Also just realized we rarely see Hilltop go outside. But yeah, a decent idea for a character episode, but it wasn't very good in execution, and I might say this is probably my least favorite of the episodes so far. I still wouldn't say it's outright, like, horrendous, it's just off-putting is the best word I could say. Episode 20. We see a golden train and someone from French HQ. This stranger comes across a gangler harassing a girl, so we're introduced to a new hero. His heroism gets him into the newspaper, which Keiichiro reads in surprise that the Lupinrangers have a new ally, although Kairi is in disbelief as well. So a man says he himself is Lupin X. Showing off flips and taking people's phones without looking.
Merci.
Keiichiro arrests him.
Oh yeah? Back
at base, the Patrangers interrogate the man who introduces himself as Noel. Commander Hilltop says that this is their new transfer from French headquarters and will be joining their team, with Keiichiro acting as you'd expect. During a gangler attack, Noel steps in and transforms into Patron X.
警察チェンジ
X9 警察 X パトレン X
気高く輝く警察官パトレン X
Both the Patrangers and Lupinrangers are stunned seeing this man being a double agent. Even more surprising is that Noel and Goody know each other. After a mecha fight that shows Noel's really cool transition into his train from Lupin to Patron X, we get a bit more explanation. He's officially part of the global police, creating the VS Changers himself, and is infiltrating the Lupinrangers' ranks to gain their trust, while also taking pieces of the Lupin collection to study. Okay, we're getting to this stretch of episodes, huh? Episode 21. The Patrangers reluctantly accept Noel into their team. Episode 22. Noel tries to get Sakuya and Umika together. Episode 23. Noel tries to get Toma to become a professional chef.
に扮しておとり捜査を試みたんだけど何も起きなかった
Episode 24. We finally get Tsukasa's backstory. Huh. Alright, so she was raised by her grandfather to be a fighter. He was a bit hard on her until one day she got into a fight and her grandfather was tearing up to see that she was okay. Tsukasa learned that he only wanted her to be safe since her parents were gone. She tells this story to Kairi, who understands her because of his connection to his brother. That was really neat. It's basically all we get though. Episode 25. The Lupinrangers have to relearn to somewhat trust Noel, which just sounds like they're retreading the same story for the 5th episode in a row. Okay, so through the power of friendship, the Lupinrangers and Patrangers are able to combine their mechs. That part is actually neat, because a new enemy has a gold safe that could only be opened with 2 VS devices, so our teams have to set aside their differences for a moment to take down the gangler. Plus, it puts Tsukasa in the spotlight, since she's the one who recommended it in the first place, and is also in the same cockpit as Kairi since he and Keiichiro kept bickering. This just makes me wish Tsukasa was the leader of the team. Or even better, the Red Ranger. Episode 26. Noel and Umika infiltrate an underground auction. The Patrangers only show up out of suit at the end. 27. Toma gets hypnotized by a gangler to do what he says, so the gangler tells him to join a martial arts dojo that happened to be assisted by Sakuya. Man, lots of Toma and Sakuya episodes, huh? Anyway, it turns out that this is just an aerobics class. Toma feels like something is off since he'd never do anything like this, so he and Sakuya grow somewhat closer. Well, more like Toma gets annoyed and there's even this hilarious frustration meter. Same. Noel gets asked if Sakuya has been acting strange at work.
ノエルさん
いや
So the Lupinrangers group up to embarrass Toma and reveal the gangler's plan to blow up the police station. And yes, I fully did enjoy this episode. Maybe it was due to just how wacky everything was, but this was actually a lot of fun. Plus Sakuya dancing in the mech and taking it over because he was mad over how much he paid for the classes, that just made me really like this episode. 28. Umika's dad arrives at the bistro and due to a misunderstanding, thinks Kairi is a playboy after Umika. We learn that after the Zamigo incident, Umika chose to leave her parents and move into the bistro, basically cutting off her dad from her life. Some fighting later, and Umika's dad comes to his senses, realizing he has to let his daughter go, until Umika says to go back home to celebrate her birthday with the whole family. That was cute, I guess. Episode 29. Keiichiro gets memory loss, and we get a clip show. Even Goody is like, hey guys, remember when... Ugh. All the tropes I hate are coming out here. Body swaps, clip shows... Okay. Episode 30. Honestly, I just watched this, and as I'm writing it down, I forgot completely what it was about. I don't mean to make this sound dramatic, but I legit forgot about this episode. Which is strange, because once I remembered, I actually really liked this one. Keiichiro is sent on vacation, which naturally sounds unrealistic to the Lupinrangers, so Kairi is sent by Noel to accompany him. Shenanigans ensue, and we have a moment where Keiichiro and Kairi help a little girl get reunited with her family. The two get a moment together, where Kairi talks about how he was jealous of another lost girl helped by his brother when they were young. It's a genuinely nice scene having these two open up to each other, and it's truly what makes this concept so great. At the end, Keiichiro is actually undercover to take down a gang and grab their VS vehicles. There's some great continuity here where the mobsters had connection to the underground auction episode from a few episodes back. Anyway, the day is saved and the Lupinrangers upstage the Patrangers once again. 31. Okay. We start with the Lupinrangers fighting a gangler, already taking his treasure. Sigh. Meanwhile, the Patrangers chase after another gangler who's being attacked by portermen, the mooks of the season that I completely forgot to bring up. The cops take this gangler who wants to plea bargain in exchange for information about the others. Sakuya thinks of wacky plans to get the gangler to talk without having to resort to a deal.
Freeze, you're under arrest.
And of course, Noelle is being upstanding about it without explaining why. So Tsukasa takes matters into her own hands and tries to reach the gangler through words and, a little human thing called empathy. It works and the gangler generally seems like it wants to leave the gang. It all seems to be going right until the Patrangers get notified that the gangler is going to be transferred to French HQ. Naturally, Tsukasa is upset and wants answers from Noelle, but he still doesn't want to explain. They escort the gangler reluctantly when portermen attack. Tsukasa takes the monster to safety, who is so happy to be almost free that he gives Tsukasa his treasure as a thank you. Suddenly, the monster turns evil. Now Noelle explains that the Lupin collection treasure was what turned the gangler good, since it reverses moral intentions. In an extremely good bit of character, Tsukasa gets a moment of silence and realization, almost getting a heart-to-heart moment with their enemy, but breaking under their true intent, to which Keiichiro says, "See, there is no such thing as a good gangler." This was one of the best episodes up until this ending. Noelle continues to make the teams look incompetent. Tsukasa gets a huge moment to shine, only to be crushed by the status quo, and worst of all, the Lupinrangers barely did anything this episode, and they're still overshadowing the Patrangers. Oh my gosh. Anyway, it turns out Gosh was experimenting on her Frankenstein's monster of sorts, detaching safes from other ganglers to create this monstrosity. 32, continuing on from episode 31. The Patrangers fight the combined monster, but it's too powerful. Noelle suggests they work with the Lupinrangers again, and of course, Keiichiro immediately says no. While Sakuya and Tsukasa were hesitant at first, they ultimately agree that the Lupins aren't above the law. Noelle then challenges Keiichiro to a duel. If Noelle wins, then they'll work together. If Keiichiro wins, the Lupinrangers, including Noelle, will turn themselves in. The duel begins, and Noelle spouts about how the Lupinrangers have something to fight for. They have loved ones to bring back, which is the first big hint Keiichiro heard about the Lupinrangers' motives. Back in episode 5, I'll remember that when I brought it up, Keiichiro said that the Lupins aren't here for justice. They have their own reasons, and Noelle just slipped that they're fighting for their loved ones. The Franken gangler attacks. Keiichiro and Noelle arrive last second, fighting together with the Lupinrangers and opening the gangler's 5 safes. We get a flashback of their duel, showing that Keiichiro was about to win, but once he heard Noelle say that they have people to fight for, Keiichiro hesitated and lost. So, I'd say this is one of the better episodes. I'd even go as far as saying as it was a great episode. Keiichiro is basically the Patranger representative, so his feelings can connect with the rest of the team. As we saw that Tsukasa can be empathetic, Keiichiro's heart shows that he may understand the hurt the Lupinrangers are feeling, and might even want to help, but can't because it goes against being a Patranger. Noelle, for once, wasn't too bad here either. Well, I did say too bad, but he does talk to the rest of the Lupinrangers about the duel, and they reluctantly understand what must be done. 33. On a random day, Sakuya says it's difficult to work with the Lupinrangers, despite being helpful. Tsukasa agrees, but the rest of the team agree that working with them would be bad for the Patrangers' reputation. That's as far as it goes for this episode, but I wanted to mention it because of how good the characterization is here. Anyway, another common Sentai trope is an episode where a team is turned into kids, and this time we have a gangler turn the Lupins into children. Except now, Umika accidentally dropped her VS changer and has to get it back from the Patrangers. Just like the other tropes I've mentioned, I'm not really a fan of this one either, but just like before, this one wasn't too bad, if only because of the added element of having to outsmart their way of getting their changer back. It wasn't as easy as Noel taking it since Keiichiro stays behind to keep an eye on him, so Tsukasa and Sakuya are roped into taking the kids back to HQ. Tsukasa couldn't say no to how adorable young Kairi is, and shenanigans ensue. Again, this was a lot of fun, and I love the way the Lupinrangers kept escalating the difficulty and getting their changers back. A funny highlight was them saying that Tsukasa looked a lot like their mom, and right as Tsukasa and Sakuya leave to fight the Gangler, their fake mom actually does look like Tsukasa, and it turns out it was Kogure in disguise. Really, the downside, as it has been for a long time now, is that Tsukasa and Sakuya look bad being outsmarted by children. I mean, you know they are the Lupinrangers, but in their eyes, they're being outsmarted by children. I guess it's not terrible here since it's still the Lupinrangers, but I want the Patrangers to get the upper hand in a situation like this. Oh, and the episode ends really abruptly for some reason. Noel says he wants to take the Patrangers to the cafe, so Tsukasa and Sakuya imagine the others serving them nicely, and then it ends. Huh. Weirdly enough, for my notes, I completely skipped episode 34 and 35 for some reason. I probably meant to go back to write for them, but I just never did. And as you know, that means I already forgot what happened. Oh, 34 is the one where Kairi gets the Lupin Magnum. I think I like this one, mostly for how the thieves dealt with their past to complete the challenge for their power-up. After being told Noel was trying to get the Magnum, the Lupinrangers go through the same trial he does, except for the last trial where they see the people they're trying to save. It's actually a neat character piece, seeing Toma and Umika refusing to shoot, while Kairi understands that yes, they have a reason to fight, and still, Kairi is a thief, and wants to do things his own way. I can get the same sentiment about episode 35, like, it's fine, it's cool. Well, in this one, Kogure gets split into 3 personalities by a Gangler. It's overall fun, and that's about it. Wow, no wonder why I completely forgot episode 34 and 35. 36. The police go after a Gangler who has a power to make someone become a slip-up, and that person is Sakuya. He lets the monster get away and feels bad about being chewed out. A salesman offers him free necklaces that calm down a person, so Sakuya uses it on Keiichiro, who actually does calm down, which is really funny. Turns out the necklaces siphon anger into a bomb. Tsukasa shows some actually really cool fighting and thinking skills to make the monster reveal where he hid the bomb, which is inside a complex tower. Keiichiro says that if Sakuya wants praise, then he should have some faith in himself. With that, Sakuya makes a successful shot. The monster is defeated through another really cool fight scene with both teams helping each other, and in the end, Sakuya lets his desperate move get to his head. You can probably tell if the Patrangers get a focus episode, I'm most likely gonna enjoy it. Like 90% of the time so far. Episode 37. A Gangler has the ability to teleport anyone back to their home, so Kairi and Keiichiro get the idea to camp outside, since that would mean they technically live outside. Keiichiro even goes as far as having his apartment emptied. Okay, that's actually really funny. He tries to talk to Toma, who is also camping, but Toma is closed off and tells Keiichiro to talk to Kairi if Keiichiro really wants to learn more about him. So Keiichiro tries, but Kairi isn't being friendly, despite an earlier episode where he called Keiichiro his friend. In truth, Keiichiro kind of does want to be friends, but it's not being reciprocated. That's basically the gist. I did like this one. I know I'm saying that a lot, but as a basis for Sentai, yeah, I liked it is pretty much the bottom line I can say, and that's pretty much why I'm saying, yeah, I like this episode without really going too deep into it. 38. Dude, I literally just finished watching this episode as I write this, and I already forgot what happened. That's kind of a running theme here, isn't it? Okay, I'm just gonna skim through this. Keiichiro tries to be friends with Kairi, but is brushed off. The police are told of 2 Ganglers appearing, and then Zamigo shows up in front of the Patrangers for the, 3rd time? Well, he's barely here. Zamigo destroys one of the Ganglers, and then both teams are told of a Lupin collection piece in space. Fighting against the Gangler and Destra later, the Patrangers protect Noel from a devastating attack, saying that regardless of how suspicious Noel is, he's still part of their team. Seems like this came out of nowhere. Hold on, why are the Patrangers making this decision and learning this lesson right now of all times? Anyway, the Lupinrangers retrieve the piece that was actually 2-in-1, and Noel retrieves a super form for whatever reason. The day is saved and Hilltop didn't get any macaroons. I didn't like this episode. As I've been mentioning earlier, Noel is making this team seem incompetent, especially in an episode that wasn't supposed to focus on him, but he still gets the power-up. It gets kind of annoying. Well, no, Noel gets kind of annoying. And he's not even supposed to be annoying, he's just... Episode 39. Noel asks the Lupinrangers if they know of a gangler named Amigo, but they lie in order to save Amigo for themselves. Umika starts to worry about the lies catching up to them, and Sakuya gives some oddly sound advice. Umika reveals to Noel that they do know of Amigo, so Kairi fights Amigo alone using the Super Lupin Red power-up.
Lupinranger.
I actually really like this power-up. The suit's okay, but I love the power of being able to, have a vision, like in Xenoblade. I just kept saying that to my wife. A vision. Episode 40. Kairi has been going off on his own for a while, with Umika and Toma noticing his standoffishness. The two fight a gangler alone who has the power to make them worry. Now for our only scene that the Power Rangers have to themselves in this episode, they argue whether the gangler is a manatee or a dugong. This would have been a really funny scene in any other episode, but right now it's kind of just annoying. Toma and Umika follow Kairi. The two also worry enough to a point that they think of fake scenarios Kairi is going through. And I actually had a lot of fun with this scene. Kairi realizes he has been worrying his friends, so after an admittedly cool fight with all their Lupin Kaiser combinations, Kairi shows Toma and Umika that he's been looking after a puppy. Noel invites the Power Rangers for food when Kairi finally opens up a bit to Keiichiro. 41. We see Kairi and Keiichiro getting along, as well as Umika and Sakuya, leaving Toma and Tsukasa to ponder on each other. Hold on, is this, I think, our only Toma and Tsukasa episode? And it's actually really good. I want to say it's one of my favorites in Sentai so far. It's actually generally a really fun episode. Toma and Tsukasa get attacked by Destra, who wants to prove to Don Dugranio that he's loyal, so Toma and Tsukasa get blown away to the gangler world. They have this great scene together where Toma opens up very slightly, but enough for Tsukasa to realize he truly cares about Umika and Kairi. She even mentions wanting to recruit him for the academy. Of course he says no, but it's a good thought. Eventually Tsukasa gets overwhelmed by mooks, and Toma uses her VS changer to shoot, revealing he's more than just a simple chef. The rest of the Power Rangers arrive and get them out, though Destra does do a number on both teams, showing how powerful he is. Guys, I think episode 42 might be the best one yet, and not in a standalone way either. I think this episode can only be as good with this much build-up. So Kairi and Noel are on the lookout for Destra, who's been trying to take out both teams. Destra basically F's them all up, so Kairi and Keiichiro, separately, tell their teams that they need to play into each other's mind games, to use them and defeat the monster. As in, the Pad Rangers are going to wait for the Lupin Rangers to take Destra's Lupin collection he stole. So the battle is about to begin, and both teams prepare. Once again, Destra basically F's them all up, until Kairi and Keiichiro steal their resolves, having Kairi push Destra's attack back, while Keiichiro steals the Lupin collection pieces along with Noel. One giant mecha fight later with both teams, and our group celebrates. So, from the complete opposite of all that cool stuff, we have episode 43, and if anything would exemplify my constant distaste for this show, this two-parter is basically it. And the worst part is that I want to like these characters, but... So the previous patron Nigo arrives just in time for word to get out that someone's been leaking information from the global police. Noel is basically framed for everything and is on the run. In between all this, the Lupin Rangers are told that Noel isn't human, leading into our next episode, 44, where Noel explains he's part of an ancient society that lived in the gangler world, until one day his people were driven out by Don Dugranio. Noel was basically alone until Arsène Lupin took him under his wing, also revealing that the Lupin collection was made in the gangler world. I think that was mentioned before, but they emphasize it here again. Surprise, surprise, the previous Patroniga was a leaker this whole time. The Pad Rangers fight him in their mechs, which feels like it's been forever since they last fought alone in it. And the day is saved. Although, the Patrangers give a moment of silence for their previous companion, who may have died to the Gangler, and Noelle is accepted into the Lupinrangers' promise to return those they love. Everything with the Patrangers was so good. I loved the drama of them meeting up with an old friend, and to decide if they trust him or Noelle. And yeah, the melodrama is, well, exaggerated, but even Keiichiro gets some time to cool off and really think about the situation, while Sakuya and Tsukasa have to think back to how the leaks got started. But then we get the Lupinrangers and Noelle's backstory, which, if you ponder for a moment, doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, even at the end, it just doesn't matter that he's not human. So, Noelle is technically not human, but it doesn't change anything. The Lupinrangers are written to feel betrayed and all that, but why would it matter to them if Noelle isn't human in the first place? Noelle still gives them the Lupin pieces, he still gives them info, he still saves them from danger. It's all Noelle, Noelle, Noelle. Episode 45, Sakuya Saves Christmas. Episode 46, another clip show? You might already know from this video that I give clip show episodes a baseline negative, and now we got a second. And even worse, its basis is a game show, which I also think is a terrible setup for these kinds of episodes. So the Lupinrangers are trapped in a game by a Gangler, and the game has them do silly things while thinking back to past episodes. I admit, it was a little funny seeing Kairi start doing Toma's yoga dance and Toma immediately gets this angry vibe. But on the other, better side of this, Keiichiro starts to think back to past cases, and starts to piece things together. He tells his team that he's suspecting the Cafe Trio to be the Lupinrangers, and this is where we get our clip show flashbacks. This setup is actually good, since the clips are short and show the exact moments when the team starts suspecting Kairi and friends. We also get this really long clip show showing off all the mechas with Goody, and why is it 5 minutes long? I'm exaggerating, but yeah, this goes on for quite a while. By the end, it seems like Keiichiro has had enough suspicion to put the cafe under watch, but Sakuya says to give them more time, and he'll look into Kairi himself, leading us into the next episode. 47. Sakuya asks Umika out to lunch, and slowly starts to see how she's connected to the disappearances from 2 years ago. Luckily, Toma and Kairi stop her from spilling everything. Then, as tensions rise, the Lupinrangers face off against Amigo, who got a Lupin collection piece that allows him to liquefy himself and avoid damage. The Patrangers fight Gosh, who also got a piece that can actually hurt Noelle. The team get hurt, and Noelle gives himself up, finally revealing to the Patrangers that he isn't human. Which still doesn't matter to the last episode. 48. Noelle is taken to Don Dogranio, who scratches Noelle's face in a cool way. Legit, that just looks menacing. Meanwhile, Umika wishes things could have been different, because she actually liked working at the cafe and becoming friends with the Patrangers. Speaking of which, the Patrangers see a broadcast of Gosh saying Noelle is captured on the Sentai Cross, and she taunts the two teams to rescue him. The Patrangers arrive, but Gosh puts up a good fight, causing the Patrangers to de-transform. Once the thieves get there, Don Dogranio says he'll let Noelle free if they also reveal their identities. After some thinking, they slowly take off their masks. Also giving us our helmetless scene for the Lupinrangers. Sakuya is upset that Umika was a Lupinranger. Keiichiro and Tsukasa are speechless. One rescue later, and Gosh is defeated with both teams combining their powers. Then after a mecha battle against Gosh's experiment, the Lupinrangers go into hiding. Despite the whole climactic reveal of the Lupinrangers, and this being a good episode on paper, it's just that. It has some really neat ideas, some really cool things that could have been great, but I think the reveal of the Lupinrangers, on one hand, I'm glad it is this early and not saved for like the last episode, but on the other hand, it doesn't seem earned or warranted here. Like, Don Dogranio just says, reveal yourself and I'll let Noelle free, and they just do it. Like, they think about her for like 2 seconds, they're like, okay, we'll do it, and they all fight anyway. Oh, and also, Zamigo is here. He's like watching the TV for like a minute. Again, cool things on paper, but the execution is, ugh. Episode 49. The cafe is completely stripped, and the Lupinrangers plan their next move. Noelle tries to talk to Sakuya and Umika, but Sakuya immediately yells at him for keeping all these secrets, asking why Noelle wanted them to grow closer to the cafe workers. Noel says it's because he wanted them to be something, even friends, and he's truly sorry for what he's done. Keiichiro is off alone when Kairi has a scene similar to their very first interaction. Kairi confronts him, asking why Keiichiro isn't getting angry despite the lies, to which Keiichiro says he is angry, but most of all, he's angry he couldn't have helped Kairi sooner. Keiichiro gives him intel about gangler disguises being made from people they've killed. Don Dogranio finally makes his move and shows his power by destroying nearly the whole city. Toma and Umika are taken by the global police into a hospital, while Kairi tries to find Keiichiro himself. The two are face to face once again, sharing a moment as the morning sun comes up. Keiichiro says he became an officer to help people in pain, and if that same dream is stopping him, then he's willing to put up the badge to help Kairi. The Patrangers are called for a mecha fight. Meanwhile, Kairi confronts Amigo. They have this really cool transformation sequence where you see the reflections in ice. And now for our penultimate episode. We get a clip show. Just kidding. Episode 50. Toma and Umika escape the hospital and try to find their weapons, but are stopped by Tsukasa and Sakuya. The thieves try to appeal to their emotions, saying they just want to save people. The cops are understanding, but Sakuya also, like Umika, wishes things could have been different. To which she says, all these events are what led to them to meet, and Umika thinks Sakuya is a great person. Toma and Umika save Kairi during his battle with Amigo. Then Noel steps up with a plan to defeat him. It's finally time for the Lupinrangers to take on the monster that changed their lives. Meanwhile, Don Dogranio makes his move onto the city, and the Patrangers are called to take him on. In a really cool action scene, Kairi steals Amigo's ice gun and shoots him, but misses, accidentally freezing Noel. Well, not an accident, since they planned for this, for Noel to take Amigo's collection piece. The two teams' fights start to intersect when Amigo enters Don Dogranio's golden safe into a void, challenging the Lupinrangers to a final battle. Before making their decision, the thieves say goodbye to the cops and have their final confrontation with Amigo. During their fight, Toma and Umika locks Amigo's safe. Noel's plan was locking Amigo's ice powers, opposite of how the thieves have been opening the safes. With that, Amigo is defeated, returning all the people he froze. The Lupinrangers have won. Episode 51. We will meet again. The Patrangers are having a tough time against Don Dogranio, until his powers start to disappear suddenly. Inside his safe, the Lupinrangers are taking his Lupin collection pieces and transferring them to Kogure through the collection book. Now with Dogranio weakened, we get our helmetless transformation by the Patrangers. We also get Super Patron X and Super Patron Ichigo. Dogranio is still alive after a ginormous finishing blast. One more shot should do, but Kairi and the others are still inside Dogranio's safe. Keiichiro begins to walk slowly to him, thinking back to the memories of both teams, of he and Kairi getting along. A year passes. Some ganglers are still around, but at least the Patrangers are basically superstars, while the people the Lupinrangers wanted to rescue are living their lives. Don Dogranio is held in an underground prison. A gangler alert is heard, so the Patrangers go to it, but also come across Kairi's group. You're gonna have to bear with me for this explanation here. A special collection piece from the movie called Jackpot Striker rescued Kairi from Dogranio's safe, but the people who were able to retrieve Jackpot Striker was a new team of thieves. A team made up of Kairi's brother, Tomo's fiancé, and Umika's friend. An out-of-suit roll call later, and the teams fight the gangler together. But the Lupinrangers are still thieves, and they're here with a warning. They're gonna steal your treasure. Here's a review part of the video. If you're new to my channel, then you can have this portion on in the background as a podcast, since I normally just copy-paste visuals from earlier. So, this was a long time coming, wasn't it? I've mentioned Lupat several times over the years, and rarely ever in a complimentary way. I don't want to overstate what's already been said 1,000 times before, but they are valid critiques, so that's pretty much what I'm going to be spouting for a while here. First off, if you're a fan of Lupat, then good on ya. You heard me talk about the show, but you can probably tell I'm not a fan, so the rest of this won't exactly be positive. I do have some good things to say, but the negative absolutely outweighs the positives for me. We'll start with the biggest criticism. This is more of the Lupinranger show featuring Patranger. And yeah, I'll validate that the Patrangers get sidelined at basically every corner. The story focuses more on the Lupins get more action and mecha scenes, the Lupins get both major power-ups, not to mention the times where I said the Patrangers barely show up in certain episodes. I saw one comment on Twitter say that a lot of people had expectations for a premise that was never promised. And that, I can agree with, to a certain extent. However, the title alone being called Lupinranger VS Patranger does give a certain expectation of a cops and robbers type of show. And we do have that, at its bare minimum. Heck, it even feels like both teams are too busy with their own things to even cross paths in the latter half. One example that comes to mind is the Lupin Magnum episode, where it's fully about the Lupinrangers, so the Patrangers barely get as much of a reaction to anything. And like I mentioned, the Patrangers don't even get a power-up until the final episode. And that example keeps stretching further as we learn of the Lupinranger story, so the Patrangers look even more incompetent to not know anything about their enemies until the very end. The clip show where Keiichiro started to piece the clues together was too little too late, and even more little with what clues we did have. It wasn't very cohesive and the Patrangers looked worse for it. Hey man, I'm not asking for the Patrangers to take over the entire show. In a way, I'm not even asking for them to be completely balanced because that's just a difficult thing to write for in general. My main concern was the team not having much agency compared to their supposed rivals, the literal second half of the title. We know the Lupinrangers are the thieves everyone's talking about, supposedly. But what about the Patrangers? Their supervisor brings up that the Patrangers aren't as popular, which just showcases even more how much they don't really matter. And when they finally get some recognition, again, it's at the very end where it's too late and their story is basically over to the viewer. You could say a lot happens before or a lot happens after and they're like pop stars and the biggest celebrities in the world, but that doesn't matter to the viewer when it's already too late. And that's just story-wise. If we want to get to characters, then the Patrangers have some really good ideas that, again, get overshadowed. While I prefer calmer Reds, Keiichiro being a hot-headed leader is a good trope for the cops. You know, the detective on scene yelling about catching the thieves, then seeing why he's that way, plus actually having calmer moments when it's warranted, and saying he's willing to throw his badge away to help Kairi. It's really good. That last part admittedly seemed a little out of nowhere for me, but regardless. Keiichiro is a great Red, on paper. And the scene when he protected people by taking a gangler's attack, that alone puts him high up there for me. And yeah, his growth with Kairi is good, because we see them trying to get along, then wanting nothing to do with each other, and then realizing they are friends. Again, it's good. Tsukasa and Sakia don't get as much development, and before you start typing away, look at it from the bigger picture. I guess Tsukasa didn't need much focus because her actions spliced in throughout the show is basically what we needed, and I will say she is one of my favorite Rangers in Sentai regardless. Sakia, on the other hand, we get told he's a womanizer in one episode and we gotta take their word for it, I guess. Like, I don't remember any moments where he tries to hit on anyone before Umika or anything. And then when he does talk to Umika, it's a little bit creepy. When I was talking to my wife about my thoughts on the show, she said that in real life, yeah, it would be creepy to see anyone like Sakia. But in a kid's show where we know he probably means well, it can be kind of charming. And I admit, it does seem a little cute way later. Though for most of the show, I feel like I don't really know Tsukasa or Sakia other than their basic one-line traits. Oh wait, Sakia is a sharpshooter. We just don't know how, or we don't get any episodes at least telling us anything else, so... And Hilltop. Poor Hilltop, man. He seemed like he'd be this cool mentor type who's already steps ahead of everyone, but nope. If something goes wrong, he says he'll take the blame, and that's about it. Not even mentioning their robot buddy, who I already completely forgot was called. But, okay, you get it. I get it. We all get it. The Patrangers aren't the main focus, and I should just see the show as it is. That's part of the main issue, though. What I talked about is how the show is. I didn't make up any scenarios or talk about things I wished happened. I talked about the show itself. And yeah, it's pretty disappointing. On top of that, it's pretty boring. So, let's move on to the other half of the show, the Lupinrangers. Oh yeah, so with how little the Patrangers get, you'd expect me to at least enjoy who the show actually does put the literal spotlight onto. Except not really, because I don't enjoy the Lupinrangers that much. And it's not because they have more than the Patrangers, no. I think they're boring. Like, I could at least give you the basic one-line sentence of Saki and Tsukasa, but Toma and Umika? Dude, I legit have no idea. Toma is the cool, quiet one who takes everything seriously. Umika, a lot of people say she's cute, I guess. Umika enjoys plushies the same way Tsukasa does. She's kind-hearted, but so is everyone else. Like I said, I don't know. I do have other things to say about Kairi, since as mentioned, he has a lot of interaction with our other Red, and both do grow for the better. Kairi is pretty smug and focuses on the mission to get his brother back. In a way, he's similar to Keiichiro, but when mentioned during one of their earlier confrontations, Kairi is doing what he believes is right. It's just not in the way the cops think justice is. And that's as far as I can say. Did I already mention I disliked Noel enough during the summary? Cause I really dislike Noel, and how he's always steps ahead of both teams, making them seem completely useless. Does he even need either team? And the Ganglers, what a waste. A third faction that both teams are after for different reasons, but they're just cannon fodder like any other Sentai villain team? Lupat is already experimenting with these two teams, a brand new idea. Why not do more? There could have been more, but nope. And speaking of waste, Zamigo. What was he doing for most of the show? He's barely here. If you were watching this visually on screen, I had during one of the moments where he literally had
5 seconds
of screen time in a 2-parter episode. Literally
5 seconds.
He had nothing to do with the episode. He was just sitting on like a building, and he was laughing. He was like, ha ha ha, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And that's it. He's barely here. He has one of the coolest powers and monster designs I've ever seen. And all for nothing? He could have been a monster of the week for all we know. Barely here. Okay. Move all that out of the way. Now for the positives. There are a lot of insert themes, and they're pretty good. The action is great. In the Kyuranger vs. Lupat movie, Jewel of the World shows up for a quick cameo, and that was honestly the best part of Lupat. Guys, Lupinranger vs. Patranger is one of my most disliked Sentais of all time. With all that being said, I'll see you guys next time when we become Knights of Valor with Kishiryu Sentai, Ryu Soldier.